There is a track doing the rounds online right now. It's called This Is England by a character called Danny Bones from a channel called TheNodeProject. I'm going to put a link in the description. More people should be watching it. I'll explain why by the end of this. The track goes like this. A man says he's England till he dies. He turns on the television and is told his country is full of racists and fascists. He looks out the window and sees borders open, prices soaring, crime ignored, poverty spiking, the NHS striking, free speech shrinking, benefits expanding, public services crumbling. And then, at the very end, over the music, you hear someone crying. I want to talk about that gap. The gap between what the television tells him and what he sees when he looks out the window. Because that gap is, I would argue, the defining political tension in Britain right now. And a track like this one articulates it in a way that a think piece, a white paper, or a parliamentary debate simply cannot. Let's take the lyrics seriously, because they deserve to be taken seriously. The opening tension is deliberately constructed. The telly says the country is full of racists and fascists marching. The streets say Britain is dying. These are presented as two entirely different conversations happening simultaneously, one in the media, one in lived experience, and the narrator is trapped between them. He loves his country, he identifies with it completely, and he is being told repeatedly by the people who run the national conversation that this love itself is the problem, that the flag he sees flying in the street is something to be suspicious of. That is not a fringe feeling. That is a feeling shared by a very significant portion of the British population, and it has been building for a long time. Then the track moves into something that cuts across traditional political lines entirely. Services crumbling, taxes rising, struggling at work, barely surviving, the rich getting richer, the poor getting started. These are not right-wing talking points. These are grievances that belong to anyone who has sat in an A&E for 6 hours or watched their energy bill double, or worked full-time and still not been able to afford to stay where they grew up. The song is not interested in left versus right. It's interested in the feeling that the system is failing the people it's supposed to serve, and that nobody in charge is being honest about it. And then there is the line that I think is the emotional core of the whole thing. I hate to confess that I'm seeing pride die. That word, confess, he hates to say it. There is shame in admitting that you're losing faith in something you love, and that shame is real, and it is politically significant, because it tells you something important about where a large part of the electorate currently lives. Not in anger, exactly, not in hatred, in grief, in the particular exhaustion of someone who wanted to be proud, who still wants to be proud, and who is watching that possibility get harder to access every year. The establishment's response to this kind of expression has, for the most part, been to categorize it rather than engage with it, to point at the mention of open borders and say, ah, there it is, to find the one element that can be filed under a familiar label and use that label to avoid reckoning with everything else in the song. The NHS, the cost of living, the free speech question, the sense of being talked at rather than listened to. None of that gets addressed, because if you can successfully define the person speaking as a type, you don't have to respond to what they're actually saying. That strategy is failing. The evidence that it is failing is everywhere, in election results, in polling data, in the widening gap between what politicians say about Britain and what ordinary people report experiencing inside it. Which brings me back to TheNodeProject. What Danny Bones is doing, and doing well, is giving voice to something that the mainstream has repeatedly refused to hold space for. Not with a newspaper column, not with a panel discussion, with music, with a character, with something people can feel rather than just process. That is a harder thing to dismiss, and I suspect that's entirely intentional. The question the song is really asking is a simple one. Why does expressing love for this country, combined with legitimate frustration about how it is being managed, get you labeled rather than heard? That question does not have a comfortable answer, but the fact that so many people are finding it in a YouTube channel rather than on the BBC ought to tell you everything about where we currently are. Go and find the Node Project. Link is in the description. Make up your own mind. That's all any of us can do.